weekend, and finally we know who's in the running to be MP for Glasgow East. There are 9 candidates. It's now too late to get a postal vote, but you have another week to arrange a proxy vote if you need one. Today, the top box office draw was the Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg. And as the bookies confirmed Labour as narrow favourites, the political campaign made its way to the floor of the House of Commons. Nine candidates looks quite modest these days. There are a record 25 trying their luck against David Davis in Halton Price and Howden tomorrow. Meanwhile, the people who've already secured berths at Westminster couldn't keep Glasgow out of their exchanges today at Scottish Questions.
The Minister will be aware that most of the Commonwealth Games will be concentrated in the Glasgow East constituency, where 47% of people are economically inactive and more than half do not have a single qualification to their name. Does he recognise that Glasgow East has reached this sorry state after 11 years of Labour central government and decades of Labour local government? And can he explain to the House, if not to Mr Salmond, why the Prime Minister is refusing to even visit the constituency after attempting to impose...
That part of the question is well beyond the scope. So,
Mr Speaker, the Conservative Party have just noticed that there's poverty in some parts of the UK. Well, we could have told them that.
One MP who took the day off to head north was the Liberal Democrats' national leader Nick Clegg. His candidate came third last time, and he offered a withering analysis of his main opponents.
The choice is this: the politics of neglect from the Labour Party, the politics of opportunism from the SNP, the politics of contempt from the Conservative Party, or the politics of hope from the Liberal Democrats.
Elsewhere, Labour talked about knife crime, the SNP showed off a hero of Red Clydeside, and the Conservatives chided them all for, allegedly, failing to deal with crime. Well, I'm joined by Lorraine Davidson of The Times, who's been out and about in Glasgow East today, and by the author and political analyst Gerry Hassan. Lorraine, what was your impression going down there of what the mood is?
I think the mood is pretty much people are going to come out and vote the way they've always voted. So it's going to come down to who gets their vote out, because there is certainly a Labour vote there, although it's very soft. The Nationalists certainly have a vote there. They've leafleted in that area on a regular basis. I think they've got a councillor who's worked the area very well. So I think they know where their vote is. There's no animosity towards the Tories the way there would have been 10 or 15 years ago. They weren't being drummed out of town, and all the parties have very strong candidates. So I think it's going to come down to who identifies their vote and who gets the vote out, just who does the work.
So you don't think, because what everyone's saying is that there are low turnouts in that constituency usually, therefore there's a lot to play for if you can convince people who don't normally vote to vote for you, but you don't think that's going to happen?
I don't think there's a lot of switching going on, and the Nationalists are obviously saying they are getting Labour voters coming over to them, but it just feels as if there's not a great swing going on to any particular party. Everyone's just doing what they've always done, although the vast majority are saying we're not going to vote. So it is going to be, without any doubt, a very low turnout. So that does make it incredibly difficult to predict, but it still feels to me as if Labour's vote is there. It's not going here, there and everywhere. It's not trying to identify where it needs to go to give Labour a good kicking. So I think if Labour can get their vote out, I think they're going to hold this seat.
Gerry Hassan, do you think there may be an element of truth to the idea that this vote has been deliberately arranged at a time when the minimum number of people will be around to take part in it, and therefore Labour are in a way looking just to get their core vote out?
Yes, that's true. And also a classic incumbent party worried often goes for a short campaign as well to prevent the opposition from building a momentum. We've had 5 Westminster by-elections in Scotland since 1997, and every one of them the Labour vote's fallen, and I think in all of them the SNP vote's risen. The Labour vote, if you remember, in Dunfermline West fell by about 17%. The party can afford that kind of fall in its vote percentage-wise and still just hold the seat. But if it falls a bit more than that, and if the SNP can take Lib Dem and Tory tactical votes to say the SNP are the obvious challenger to Labour, then Labour begin to look like they're in serious trouble. And what I think will be, despite what Lorraine's saying, because it's too early to tell on that side, it looks like it will be a very close result.
So you reckon that they really are, the Labour Party really is at risk here?
Yes, they are at risk. I mean, at the moment, it looks like it's going to be a close contest. And we're at a position where a very, very narrow victory for the Labour Party will be viewed as a huge success given these political circumstances. And I think, funnily enough, I mean, this is a wider political point, I think actually a narrow victory for Labour could actually be the worst of all results for the Labour Party. Because if you put it in the wider context, the Labour Party National Policy Forum's meeting the next day, and there's already all sorts of crises brewing in that about the trade unions wanting a return to secondary picketing, discontent with Brown. A very narrow Labour victory buys Brown a bit of space when he's in very, very deep trouble.
Yes, because the other side of this, presumably, Lorraine, is that everyone in the Labour Party is going around at the moment saying this is terribly, terribly, terribly difficult, and we may well lose this. And it could well be that what the plan is, they hold it by 4 figures or something like that, and then they turn around and say, marvellous victory, very difficult circumstances, relaunch Gordon Brown's career.
I think that's right. I think this is extremely serious. I think possibly terminal for Gordon Brown if he loses it. But frankly, now, the way things have been talked up, if he holds this by 1 vote, then it's a victory. It's enough for him. He's OK. He's out the woods till the next crisis. So that's all he needs. That's all Labour are looking for. But I also felt that Alex Salmond played into Labour's hands a bit with this this week as well by saying a political earthquake is on the way. And the Liberal Democrats, as you remember, took Dunfermline at the last by-election, but they don't actually go out and say, we're going to win this. They play it very canny. They sort of say, we're playing to win. But actually, if you come out as the main contender and say, we're going to take this seat, then some Labour voters who might have been thinking, I'd like to send a message to Gordon Brown, but I'm not sure that actually I want to possibly precipitate his downfall, and we could end up with David Cameron in number 10. That's not really a message that's going to appeal to voters in the East End of Glasgow. So actually, I think if the opposition overdo it and make out that they are on the verge of taking this seat, that could actually ironically pull some Labour voters back to Labour.
Gerry, I heard you on Radio 5 Live yesterday making quite an interesting point about religion in this vote. You were basically arguing that James Macmillan was talking through a hole in his hat when he'd written an article in the Telegraph saying that Labour had deserted Catholic voters and they would pay for it. Now, just to explain why you think that is talking through a hole in his hat.
Well, if you go back 30 years, there's Pals opinion polling that showed that the Catholic vote was one of the big blocks on the SNP winning in the west of Scotland. It was about 60% Labour. You get to the beginning of the 90s and that begins to dissolve, and basically the Catholic vote's the same as the rest of Scotland. Scotland's a broadly secular, liberal place, and most Catholics are the same as the rest of Scotland in their voting intentions. So James Macmillan's argument, somehow through a variety of ethical issues, embryo research votes, the Catholic vote's going to be shifted by other things, is just playing to a Scotland that doesn't really exist except at the margins.
Right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's a very old-fashioned notion and quite an insulting one to talk about the Catholic vote as if they all go out like a herd of sheep and do what they're told to do and listen to the message that they get from the priest on a Sunday.
Yes, because very brief, because another point you were making is you were saying you thought the political hierarchies in Scotland paid too much attention to this.
Yes, well, the Labour Party's always been, concerned about the kind of, the points the Catholic Church is sensitive for the last 20, 30 years, all sorts of issues, abortion, homosexuality, all sorts of ethical. And I've thought the Catholic leadership talks for Catholic voters. It's increasingly less so.
All right, don't go away. We'll be back with you in a moment. But first, it's exactly 1 year since Labour and Plaid Cymru formed a coalition in the